Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough, brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. Ben Grant, joined as always by JB, and we are here to get you set for Saturday night's home game against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Lots to talk about today. We are going to talk about Pete Martin, who sadly passed away this week, an Argos legend. We're also going to talk about Tavares McFadden and Atlius Bell signing with the Boatmen. We're going to go through some PFF grades and where the Argos maybe were missing in terms of how PFF saw their performance this week. And we've got a pick six question from Marco, which really gets us into the rest of the conversation. Who's going to be starting at quarterback and why? And does Arbuckle deserve a shot? Plus, we've got all our usual stuff: game preview, injury report, OCDC, one thing predictions, put me down for 20, and our CFL picks. All that and more coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. JB, before we get into things, you've noticed that the background behind me is a little different. I am recording from Something in the Water Brewing. Something in the Water Brewing is it's a fantastic place to go in Liberty Village for Argos fans, especially for anyone, of course, but Argos fans, it is steps from Lamport Stadium. I just finished watching practice. I walked down over here to Something in the Water Brewing. I've got myself a Longboat Pale Ale, which I'm enjoying throughout the course of this broadcast. And of course, it steps from BMO Field as well. And so it makes a great place to come pregame. And if you haven't made plans yet, this Saturday, Winnipeg Blue Bombers in town, come and join me at Something in the Water Brewing. I'll be down here probably about 4 o'clock or so. And if you get a chance to, Something in the Water Brewing, the best Argo beer, I think, is the Longboat Pale Ale, which is the beer that is made for fans of the Double Blue. But just talking to the guys a few minutes ago, they've got this Tortuga Pale Ale, which I just sampled. It is fantastic. 4.7, really nice taste. It doesn't have like citrusy notes or anything like that you'd maybe expect from the name of it, but it is it's a really nice product as well. So maybe do one of each. I think that'd be a perfect situation. So Something in the Water Brewing. Make sure you work your way down here in Liberty Village, in the heart of Liberty Village, just steps from Lamport, steps from BMO Field. Okay, JB, let's get into this. Our first topic today. So sad to see that the legendary broadcaster, player, and football contributor builder, Pete Martin, passed away this week. Not unexpected, but it's still sad nevertheless. It was really moving to see the piece that Mike Hogan wrote on Argonauts.ca. If you haven't seen a chance or had a chance to look at that piece yet, Pete Martin, to me, was one of the first voices that got me understanding football. He was the color commentator for the Toronto Argonauts for over 25 seasons. And when I started following the Double Blue back in the early 80s, he was the voice on the other end of the radio that was breaking stuff down and doing it so quickly. And that's what really impressed me. But of course, he made his mark in pretty much every area of football that he could. JB, you've been a coach for a long time, like I have as well. Knowing that he coached so close to us at Port Credit, you've seen directly, I'm sure, the impact that he's had in Mississauga football and in coaching in general.
Yeah, I mean, I'll second your appreciation of Mike Hogan's piece. It definitely is really, really well written, a wonderful tribute to Pete Martin, and it's amazing. The work that was done to make sure that he was recognized before he passed, and it really is so wonderful that he was recognized by the organization. My relationship with him is sort of a little more tangential, like you say. I coach in Mississauga. I've been involved in Mississauga football, so I feel a connection to him there. But even being way out here in Halifax, you want to talk about a man's reach or a man's impact. A friend of mine here in Halifax, Max Tracy, was coached by Pete Martin at Port Credit, along with Dwayne Ford, in sort of the peak of Port Credit football. And he just talked about how he and his brother and his friends were all coached by him, and they just felt honored to have been his players, to have been his students. And if you want to talk about the way a man can impact on other people, and what a tribute to him, to Pete Martin, that he had people saying, that they felt that, just lucky to have been a part of his football team or his classroom. That's an amazing tribute to a man that so many people admired. So it is sad, but I think it's not melancholic, because he did receive his flowers, and he is continuing to be celebrated for his lifetime of impact in football in Southern Ontario. So I think that's a beautiful thing, because a lot of times, to be honest, there are guys like Pete Martin that go unrecognized. And I think it's wonderful how much people are showing their appreciation for him.
And it's our responsibility to keep that alive as well, and to keep his memory alive, because like you say, his reach was it was endless. And there you are out in Halifax with stories about Pete Martin, and everywhere you go, everybody involved in football in some way today has some connection to Pete Martin, whether it's, just like me listening to him growing up, or, coached by him, or coached against him, or played with him. He played with the Argos back in the late 60s and early 70s, and then was a teacher for decades as well. So yeah, he positively impacted so many lives. And it's great to hear all the stories that we've been hearing this week. It is amazing to me just how everybody has a Pete Martin story, because he was that kind of guy and had that kind of reach. And so, yeah, like you said, it was so nice to see the Argos able to honor him as a builder and an all-time Argo. And again, if you haven't had a chance to read Mike's piece, the moment where he went to tell Pete about that is, if that doesn't have you in tears, nothing will. It's a must read. You've got to go to argonauts.ca and read that, and you'll get a real sense of who Pete Martin was. If you didn't know Pete and you didn't have a chance to interact with him or have your paths cross, that piece for sure will tell you everything you need to know in terms of the caliber of human being Pete Martin is. JB, the Argos have made two signings this week, Tavares McFadden and Atlius Bell. Both of these seem to be in response to injuries. Like it was devastation in Hamilton. It seemed like every couple plays up in the broadcast booth, we're like, there's another player down, and I'm up there with my binoculars trying to figure out who is this now. And it was one after the other after the other. The good news is that most of these seem like they're not necessarily going to be long-term, but we know the injury to Jonathan Edouard looked very serious. The injury to Jared Brinkman looked very serious. And so not surprising at all that the Argos have immediately brought in two familiar faces, Atlius Bell, who spent training camp with the Argonauts, who is a load in the middle, and actually pretty versatile player too, because he can play that edge. That's what he played in college. And but he's got the size to be able to play that middle and hold down the middle and really monitor that A gap, B gap. And you have to expect, like this week, Ralph Holley is obviously going to play a big role in filling in at nose tackle for Jared Brickman. But to have a guy like Bell, who is familiar with the system, the Argos are familiar with him. If they need him to, he could step up and plug that hole as well. And he's that sort of versatile piece that the Argos have shown they really like from their defensive linemen, like defensive tackles who you can trust to play the edge because of his time in the NCAA playing that edge and setting the edge and containing. You can trust him as a defensive tackle in those same responsibilities if you want to execute twists and stunts and so forth. So that's a nice pickup. And then Tavares McFadden, I know you and I were both. We were both kind of caught off guard when Tavares was released earlier in the season. He spent some time with Ottawa, didn't work out there. It was great to see him back at practice today. Again, just like Robert Priester a couple of weeks ago, he jumped right in and looked like he hadn't missed a beat. And so Tavares, who knows if he's going to be out there right away, if he's going to be taking reps this week, if he's going to be dressed this week, but he certainly looked like he could be based on what I saw from practice. But I can't, you, and I know you're a Tavares fan. You got to be happy to see him back on the practice field too.
Definitely. I think, I understand that they were making a move away. We never really got, as you wouldn't, I suppose, like a full explanation of what the decision was, whether it was just based on money or based on personality or based on looking for a different style of player. But I'm really happy to have him back. I think the physicality he brings in that underneath run cleanup, screen, quick out, that needs to be addressed, and I think he definitely is the right answer for that.
Yeah, we talked about that post game after the Hamilton game. It just looked like they didn't have the level of physicality required from the defensive secondary. And what's funny about Tavares is that I didn't really see him as that kind of player at Florida State. Like he was a ball hawk. He was a guy that was going to go out and make picks and have these big returns. And instead, as an Argonaut, he really turned into a physical presence, especially last year when he transitioned from corner to halfback. You saw his level of physical play escalate, and he became a real threat out there. Guys were hesitant running routes in his zones. And so if he can bring a bit of that physical presence back, again, we don't know what his status will be this week. Is it too soon to dress him? Is he going to be out there? Is he going to be backing up? We'll have to wait and see. But having him at least in Ottawa over the past month means that he's obviously kept himself in shape, and he should be ready to go. And if the Argos need to call on his number, that number 2 will be there. And he was wearing his old number 2. So yeah, glad that no one took that from him. So it's nice to see McFadden run around on the practice field.
How about Barron? How was he rolling in today?
Yeah, and he's he's more a 3-tech, right? Like Woody Barron, I do think there's a chance that we'll see him out there as well. But I look at him as more a Seresna style player. Like I think one of the reasons BC moved away from him is that BC struggled a lot against the run last year. And so I don't think Barron is necessarily a piece that you plug in as a replacement for Brinkman, because it's the same problem BC had. I think Barron is a nice guy when either Seresna, if you got Seresna playing end and you want to put Barron in as a 3-tech and kind of go heavy, I think that's pretty cool. I think if you want situational pass rushing, you want to spell Seresna a little bit, who's on the field a lot, but you want to suddenly put Barron in there to get after the quarterback. I like that from the interior, and a guy that's got enough speed to come around the edge too. But I don't see him as like, okay, Brinkman's out, we'll put Barron in as the guy. I think that's going to be more Ralph Hawley, at least at the start. In terms of plugging up the middle, just in terms of size, like Brinkman's size is what made him so, like his explosiveness obviously was key, but to be at 300 pounds and 6'1" and to be able to explode like that through the A gap, that's something that you just there aren't a lot of guys in the league like that. And so you can't just look down the roster and say, okay, who's the next 6'1", 300-pound guy who can explode like Brinkman? We don't have another guy like that. There aren't other guys like that. And so you have to now say, okay, well, what's the next best thing? And that may be Ralph Hawley right now, with just his size, his mass around that 300-pound mark, because most of the other guys are under that, and some somewhat significantly under that. So Barron I love, but I'm not sure that he's going to be at least playing the same role Brinkman did. Now, that's not necessarily to say that it has to be exactly the way that they set up last week, though. It doesn't have to. You don't have to play that style of D. You can go after the pass rusher. You can play more in sending linebackers on running blitzes and stuff like that. There are more ways than one to stop the run, but it is going to be a huge loss this week. Let's get into the PFF grades. JB, how surprised are you on a scale of 1 to 10 that Dwayne Hendricks was the player of the week for PFF this week?
Well, I mean, I think anybody who's listened to our pod knows that we are Dwayne Hendricks fans, and I had put him on the same list as McManus in terms of free agents that I felt were absolute need callbacks.
Yeah.
So I'm really I mean, I'm disappointed that he's not doing it for our team, but it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I think he's an elite defensive lineman, and he was given more freedom to go get the quarterback for sure. They sort of unleashed him, and he was, he lived in the backfield. I mean, he was a nightmare, really driving home. I get, money. There's not enough money for everybody, but of all the people who left, he's the only one I really regret us not signing.
And the thing is, he hasn't looked like that all season in Hamilton. He just happened to look like that this game. But
Yeah,
this is
well,
the
it's
level of
like
play.
Peters.
Yeah, well, Peters too. He had his he wasn't on the PFF list for like best corner of the week, but he I'm sure his grade was high because he played a great game. Those two guys were just destroying the Argos offense, rep after rep after rep. And Peters with his physical play on the corner, and Hendricks, like you said, and stopping the run as well, but really being a menace in the backfield. And they had their hands full blocking him. He obviously got up for that game. And that's what happens often when you go into play. Former teammates, former players, especially guys of that caliber, you're talking about all-star level players, then you're going to get a pretty tough matchup. So yeah, it was good for Hendricks, but
and to be honest, even as much as we loved Hendricks, I don't recall many games where he looked like that for Toronto. Like he was sort of jump stepping to the left and then firing out of a cannon. I mean, he may have remained a Toronto Argo if that was something that you could dial up every game.
yeah, if that's what you get weekly, he would be unquestionably be an all-star every year if that were his weekly performance. But yeah, he certainly brought it. And now the thing is, can he maintain that? Because that's what you said that on our postgame pod last week. Like fans are probably wondering, where was this Jamal Peters? Where was this Dwayne Hendricks all season? And the thing is, you can't produce at that level every single week. It just doesn't happen like that. But they timed it well to be able to play like that against their former team. So again, tip of the hat to both of those guys. In terms of the Argos, a pretty quiet week in terms of PFF honors. Tyson Hergott got the shout out for best special team player in the league. That is great to see, because you know how there were all these questions about the team moving on from guys like Benoit Marion, who were special teams contributors and backup defensive linemen for the Argos. And now you see why, from an organizational standpoint, you've got this draft pick from this season in Tyson Hergott, who gets out there and is not just making contributions on special teams, he's making the all PFF team for this week for his contributions on special teams. So that, I think, brings Argos fans little bit of comfort in knowing, like, yeah, we really like Benoit Marion. He was a great contributor. We really like Deontay Knight as well. But at least the guy that they sort of bet on, the guy that they drafted this season, that they've got under team control for a few years, he's out there not just playing, but playing at an elite level. So great to see from Tyson Hergott.
Well, I'm always a big proponent of, the churning the bottom of the roster.
Right.
But it's not without risk, like it's not without risk that you constantly kind of sort of rotating through who your bottom four guys are. Sometimes you might lose somebody that was more useful than you thought. So, that's the danger that you have to accept to occasionally score, like a Brinkman or somebody that you bring in and suddenly is fantastic for you.
And as happens in the CFL all the time, you don't always figure it out right away. Like, young players sometimes take a while to develop. Like, let's not forget that Anthony Calvillo bounced around a little bit. Everyone's like, oh, this guy can't play quarterback. And then it turned out he was one of the best CFL quarterbacks ever. And actually, the three down guys were talking this week on their podcast about Landon Rice, who was involved in the Johnny Manziel trade. He went to Montreal as part of that trade. And then Montreal released him because he hadn't really been much of a contributor in Hamilton. He wasn't contributing in Montreal. He got released, ended up re-signing with the Alouettes for the next season, and then played at an all-star level and has been either an all-star or on the cusp of being an all-star ever since then. And so sometimes, it takes to getting to your 30s, especially on that line, whether on the offensive or defensive side of the ball. So yeah, one of those things that you love to see Hergott get this. Their mistakes are made when you move on from free agents, but I think more times than not, the Argos have done a really good job of really trying to figure out who has been at their peak, who is still ascending, who's a guy that they absolutely need to get under contract, etc. Yeah. And for the most part, they've been on.
Exactly. And I'm not, sort of begging. I mean, I think you just have to accept that risk. That's just part of it. That if you want to find the occasional, solid starter, you're going to have to accept that sometimes it's going to come up snake eyes.
Yeah, I know exactly that. And so you just those are risks of any football organization and in any league. And the Argos, as we've always said, have handled it better than most. So again, Tyson Hergott shining is not a bad thing. JB, let's get into pick six. And pick six is brought to you by Something in the Water, where I'm recording from today. And you can see of course, see the brewing in action behind me. And of course, on the other side of me is the bar and the patio that I see them setting up for as the sun starts peeking out. This is the perfect place to come and enjoy a beverage before an Argos game. The patio is a great setup. They got food going on too. You grab yourself a beer. Longboat Pale Ale, the beer made for fans of the Double Blue. And Pick Six is a segment that we do every week where you have a chance to win a six-pack from Something in the Water Brewing. And so this week, our winner is Marco, who had a great question that is going to launch us into our next discussion topic. His question is it time for a change? Does Arbuckle deserve a shot at the starter's job, considering how great a teammate he's been on the bench? So, JB, let's go to you first on this and see what you have to say about Arbuckle deserving a shot at the starting job and where you stand on Marco's question.
No, great question. I wanted to just touch on first, which one of those vats behind you has the beer that you owe me for last year's pick contest?
Yeah. So
yes, that's right, listeners. He has yet to pay the debt.
I will pay my debt. I will at some point. But yeah, for those that aren't aware, our JB somehow won our picks contest last year, and so I do owe him a flight of Something in the Water beer. And the flights are the way to go. There's so many good beers from Something in the Water, and they're always changing too. They've got a lot of seasonal stuff, and then there's just new stuff that comes out of nowhere, and you're like, hey, this thing's awesome. Like I gotta take advantage of this before it disappears. So yeah, we will, JB, we will at some point. If you weren't in Halifax, you could be doing this right now.
Well, I'm back for the game on the 22nd. We can talk about that.
All right, maybe that'll be the day.
No, great question. Does Arbuckle deserve to start? I know I certainly have come out and said that I would support that, but I wouldn't go so far as to say deserve. I don't think I don't think that he is that much of an improvement on Dukes. I think they're all, they're pretty similar. I actually like the way the Argos are using him right now as kind of a relief pitcher to come in, and it's a change of pace if things are not working. I think he has shown, look, that's a skill too, the ability to come in mid-game and go. I think he's shown that maybe that's where he's great, is like start Dukes, and Arbuckle is a really nice kind of platoon option if Dukes isn't working. And I think that the Argos feel, and I'm in agreement with them now, that is maybe the best way to use Arbuckle, as opposed to the reverse, where you have Arbuckle and if it's not working, you go to Dukes. I think Dukes, it's just as simple to start Dukes. It gives you a sense of consistency. There's no sense of emergency. You only have to get until week, to the end of week 9. So it does lend a kind of consistency. So yeah, I guess I would have to come down on no. I don't think he's earned a right to start yet.
And for me, I'm going to say something similar, but it's a bit different. I'm looking at the wording there. Like deserve is, so the question, does Arbuckle deserve a shot at the starter's job, considering how great a teammate he's been on the bench? Like that's his job, is to be a great teammate on the bench. Like you would hope that Arbuckle, a journeyman quarterback who's been around, he spent time on 3 different teams. He's been a starter. He's been a backup. His role is to mentor Cameron Dukes. Like that's why he was brought in, is to be that veteran voice in the locker room. And so I would expect him to do his job in that regard, which he has been doing, and he's been doing it perfectly. Even looking at the way that he talked to the media post game after Hamilton, it was deferring to Dukes and talking about bringing him along and how he has helped contribute to Dukes' growth as a starting quarterback, and that everything that Arbuckle has done, he's done perfectly. But that's my expectation. I would think that you're bringing in Nick Arbuckle as Ryan Dinwiddie because you know what he is. You've worked with him. He knows the system. He knows the language, the verbiage, and you know what he is. But also because you've seen him mentor other quarterbacks, and we heard that from Arbuckle last season. Even though things didn't go well from him in Ottawa, when he had guys like Dustin Crum that were new to the CFL game, from everything I've heard, Arbuckle was a great mentor in Ottawa too. So I expect him to be that. So his behavior in that regard, his attitude, his work on the bench with Dukes, that's not the stuff that to me it really says, you have to get him out there on the field. But I think it's more situational. I think you look to get him out there on the field because he has shown the ability to play well out there as a starter. And so if he's able to come in when Dukes is struggling a little bit, maybe a bit earlier than he did in the Hamilton game, then maybe that's an option. Maybe that's something you go to. But I take issue a little bit with the word deserve there. And I just think it's more, if your quarterback's not playing well, you've got a veteran who can come in and change it up a little bit. So let's get into sorry, go ahead, JB.
His role.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm saying, I think if he knows his role is, I'm coming in if we need to change a pace, and Dukes knows that's his role, and the team knows that's his role, that's better than a kind of chaotic flip a coin. Arbuckle starts, no, he's no good. Dukes, you're in. No, he's no good. Arbuckle, you're back in. And then you get into it. It feels a little more chaotic than just having set roles of like, Dukes, we're riding you until we get our quarterback back, and Arbuckle, you're the break glass in case of emergency.
That's the danger. Like, I don't like platooning quarterbacks. That's not a system that I think works very well long term. But again, you're weathering a storm right now. You're trying to get to after game 9. And this is a system that I don't mind. And like you're saying, this isn't a true platoon. This isn't a, go out there, see who wins the job every week. And I think Dinwiddie's handled that pretty well. And just from watching practice today, that's, again, the sense that I get from how Coach Dinwiddie's going to approach this. I don't know yet, but just in terms of how the reps were being divided, Arbuckle was getting a lot more first-team reps than he usually does, but Cam Dukes still appeared to be the starter to me. And so, Coach Dinwiddie may continue to hold his cards close to his vest, but I think I think it's less about that and him more just trying to get two guys ready for the game, knowing that there's a really good chance both end up playing in it. Now, is there a platoon element to it? I don't know, but I think we're going to see Cameron Dukes start the game, and then if Arbuckle isn't ready to go, or sorry, if Dukes isn't coming out of the gates the way that you expect him to, Arbuckle's ready to go at a moment's notice. So I think that's what we'll get this week. And with that, JB, let's get into our game preview this week. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers, we had circled preseason as being a really tough game in the stretch of tough games for the Argonauts, but they haven't looked at all like their former selves. This is a big game for a different reason now for Toronto, because this has kind of become a must-win. This is a game you can't afford not to win, given how the Blue Bombers have struggled out of the gate, how they've struggled really in their passing game, especially how Collaros hasn't looked himself. And so this goes from being a really good test for the Argos to a must win in a short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I could go with must. You have to win at home. Despite it being Winnipeg, they are 2-5. They haven't won on the road. This is a game you need to, you're relatively healthy. This is a game you need to rack up to keep pace with Montreal. Like, our hope was to be, 4-5, in that range at the end of 9 games or 9 weeks. So a win here, I think, is one that you really have to go get. This is a game you should win.
And I think one of the reasons that when I look at Winnipeg, and I've been watching their last few games a little bit more closely over the past week as I prep for this week's game, they've struggled in their offensive line has struggled in pass protection because Collaros has not looked the way that he typically looks. And it's not that he's changed. He's still the same guy. He hasn't suddenly forgotten how to play quarterback. That's not at all what's happened. But he has got over $500,000 in starting wide receivers on the 6-game injured list in Dalton Schoen and Lawler. Without those two guys, that's a huge hit. And then when the offensive line has some turnover, you lose some of your best offensive linemen, and they're struggling to pass protect, then you've suddenly got a Zach Collaros that isn't necessarily able to function the way that he has been able to, with Winnipeg being at the top of the table over the last few years. And so to me, that's where the Argos have to take advantage. And we'll get into that in our OCDC, but like the D line of the Argos, even though they're banged up as well, they have to own that Winnipeg front and prevent them from being able to run the football, because that's the only thing that Winnipeg's really been able to generate on offense. And you look at them last week in Saskatchewan, they struggled so much because Saskatchewan is excellent at stuffing the run. And if Winnipeg can't run, they've shown this year that they're going to be in trouble. And I know Ontario Wilson had that huge game a couple of weeks ago, but that's an anomaly. That hasn't been something that he's been able to duplicate and reproduce. So Toronto's job is going to be make sure they don't run the football, and they're going to put themselves in a pretty good situation to be able to win this football game.
Pretty similar teams.
Sorry, go on, JB. Yeah.
No, I was going to say they're pretty similar teams in a lot of ways. I think that, Winnipeg could easily have 3 wins. Toronto could easily have just 2. Like statistically, you look at offensively, defensively. I mean, I think this is going to be a very tight game. This is going to be, I think, a game that Toronto should win, because I don't think Winnipeg is better than anything that Toronto does, but they still, they're still Winnipeg.
Similar in some ways, like Toronto's O-line has played a lot better, but you've got a young quarterback behind that line as opposed to the veteran quarterback.
They're rush first. They're a rush heavy team.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. And Toronto's had receiver injuries to go along with, not to the same degree that Winnipeg has had, but again, it's a positional group that has been banged up.
And neither relies on big plays. I mean, there are differences, but offensively, I think they're actually pretty similar.
Let's go through the Toronto injured list, and we'll go through Winnipeg's as well a little bit more quickly. But Toronto's is interesting because we're through 6 games now, and so guys that started the season on the 6-game injured list are eligible to return this week. There are 2 that I think might, and the rest probably won't yet. So Tunde Adeleke, if we're going alphabetically, he's eligible to come off the 6-game injured list. Probably doesn't yet this week. He's coming off a knee injury, and he's practicing full, but practicing full doesn't mean you're 100%. It means you're able to participate in all the drills. It doesn't necessarily mean that, you're ready to go and 100% ready to return to action. And I'm not sure Adeleke is there yet. Again, I'm wrong a lot, but that's just based on what I see. Rasheed Bailey was knocked out with a head injury. Jamal Peters on the other end of that one in Hamilton. That's going to be touch and go. He's going through protocol right now. He didn't practice yesterday. Looked to be limited today in practice as he sort of tests the water a little bit and tries to move around as best he can and see how he responds to that. And so that's probably going to go right up until Saturday before they have an answer on Rasheed Bailey. Tyshawn Blackburn went full yesterday. He looked to be going full today. That's a great sign. Jared Brinkman, this is the big loss we talked about. He was in a boot. He had a scooter at practice. This is, nothing's official right now, but Jared Brinkman will not be playing for the Argos this week. I would imagine he's going to end up going on the 6th game, but we'll have to wait and see on that. And then Jonathan Edouard unable to practice as well. We saw that what looked like a pretty gruesome elbow injury last week. I imagine that is also going to be some time. Guys that we do expect to see back soon. So Robert Priester, we saw with the shoulder injury. He was limited yesterday, limited again today. I think that'll be his official designation. Appeared to be, trying out to see what he could do. I feel like that's an injury just because of the fact that he was on the sideline last week working with the bands, trying to get some motion in that shoulder. Because of that, that tells me he's maybe closer than you might be in another situation. And so if they can get that braced up, maybe he's able to get out there. We'll have to wait and see on that. I think he's going to be another game time decision. But I do think Dave Ungerer is going to be able to return, the wide receiver who had such an amazing training camp and then got hurt right before the regular season. And Kevin Mittal, who was the first-round draft pick for the Argos that we've been desperate to see. I think he looks pretty close, and maybe he's able to return this week too. And so if the Argos can't go with Edouard at corner, and I don't think they can, then it means you have to go American at that spot. And so it's perfect timing that you've got Unger and Mittal coming back at receiver. Maybe the Argos go with 2 Canadian wide receivers, and that's how they offset those roster requirements. So that's what the situation looks like to me right now. But again, I don't actually know anything. I just sit there and watch things. So we'll see how that works out. For the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, JB, what do you make of Brady Oliveira not practicing yesterday? Listed as having a shoulder injury, had a really physical game last week in Saskatchewan. Is there a chance this is just him getting a rest day, or do you maybe read more into that?
No, I would think that that's just a rest day. I didn't see him come out of the game injured. I would imagine that's just a rest day.
That's what I'm leaning to as well. We'll see what his designation is from today's practice. I think if you see that he didn't practice today as well, maybe now you start raising a Spocky eyebrow. But one day for a running back, for a veteran running back, mid-season.
I would assume Brady. I would assume Brady has a pretty good grasp on what holes to run through.
Yeah, no, it's true. But I would expect to see him, even if yesterday was a rest day, I would expect to see a limited designation today from him or a full. And if you get back to back, did not practice that, I'm starting to think a little bit more about how I want to prep for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, because they change a lot. Like, they don't have another Brady Oliveira, right? They have, like, Johnny Augustine isn't that. It's a very different style. And so you do need to, as a defense, you want to know, like, you need to know where you stand coming into the game, because if it's not Oliveira, then what you're planning, what you're scheming for isn't necessarily going to be the same thing. So I think it would be helpful for the Argos to see him out of practice today. All right, JB, it is time for your favorite segment. It is OCDC. For OCDC, we will be taking a look at both the offensive and defensive side of the ball for both teams, and we will bring our area of expertise to the party for both sides. Let's start with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I'll go first on the offensive side of the ball. If I were the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, this is how I'm going to attack Toronto. So first of all, I think you do need to test Toronto on the run. I've been saying for the last several weeks for OCDC, don't bother trying to run the football. Hamilton didn't bother last week. Montreal barely bothered the week before. Saskatchewan barely bothered the week before that. You should not try and run the football against the Toronto Argonauts when Jared Brinkman is out there. I'm not sure that's the same case when Brinkman isn't dressed. And so for this game, with Brinkman not expecting to go, if I'm Winnipeg, I test them out there. I try to run heavy. I try those power runs. I see what's working up front. And if it's still the same, if the other Argonauts are able to step up, if Wyndham McManus is flying into those holes and you still can't run the ball, then I'm ready to abandon that quickly. But I think you have to at least test the Argos without Brinkman there just to see if they're able to hold up the same way that they have been. Now, once we get beyond that, now I think this is where you turn to Collaros, and I think you have to move the pocket. We know Toronto's pass rush is going to be good. That's something that it actually may even be better than it was with Brinkman on the field, because you've got other guys you can turn to who are excellent pass rushers. And so if that's the case, then now you have to move the pocket if you're Winnipeg. So I want Collaros on the run. I think he throws really well on the run, and he's just going to have to find his new Dalton Schoen. Schoen was the answer for him last season when he escaped the pocket, looked downfield. It seemed like it was always Schoen coming across the backside of the formation. You're going to have to look to your other guys, and whether that's Dembski or Wilatarski or Ontario Wilson, he's going to have to find his receiver, his guy that can make the play downfield. But I think if you can bring him outside the pocket, you're maximizing his skill set, his ability to throw in the run, and you're keeping him out of harm's way, because that pocket hasn't necessarily been the safest place for him to stand this season. So that's my Winnipeg offensive plan. JB, what are you doing on the defensive side of the ball if you are the Winnipeg Blue Bombers?
Well, Winnipeg, I think, will follow what other teams have done, which is you're just going to simply be right on top. You're going to be like a 10-yard window. You're just going to be right on top of guys that if you take away Duke's first look, it's a problem. He essentially is not looking downfield for look number 2, and the line has had some issues holding up for a look 2. So if he sees that his first look is covered, he is scrambling. I mean, that's what happened in the Hamilton game. If I looked at that Hamilton tape, That's the only thing that makes me think they might think about Arbuckle, is just because it did look like Dukes was not able to find a second look and maybe should have pulled the trigger on some of those first looks. So if I'm Winnipeg, of course I'm playing really tight man coverage. I want him to see my guy right on top of his guy when he looks to make a pass. And they were okay with the run happening. So I mean, that's an interesting idea. I think when you have the box that crowded, in general, it's decent run coverage. You're not going to get huge runs when everybody's within 10 yards of the line. So it does kind of work for run, but I think Hamilton's plan is the one to be copied, which is, really, really tight coverage, and you can go back and forth between zone and man. But even in zone, you're going to load up underneath and really, make Dukes try and go through his checkdowns, and then if you can get the pressure, that's a huge problem. Toronto had a real hard time getting away with anything that wasn't, a run or like a really quick, like screen or smoke play out to the side.
And if we switch to the other team, the good guys for the Toronto Argonauts, I want to see a balanced attack. I think you have to force Winnipeg to guess on defense. If you are running in obvious run situations, they're going to stop you. They're going to stuff you. I don't want to see runs on 2nd and 2. It's not going to be there. If you run on 2nd and 2 against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, you're going to end up with 3rd and 3. That's just how it's been week in, week out. And so I think you have to really keep them off balance. And so that sometimes means, maybe you're passing on first down, maybe you're running on 2nd and 8 sometimes, just to mix that up so that you can't necessarily say, okay, they're definitely passing. Let's sit on this. We'll back up. We'll rush 3. Everyone else is in coverage, because Dukes has had trouble in those situations. And so if you keep Winnipeg guessing, I think you're going to be in put yourself as a team and Dukes as a quarterback in a more positive situation. I wouldn't mind getting back to RPOs, which we haven't really seen. I know that's tough for a young quarterback, but this is maybe more if Arbuckle gets into the game, if he comes in later on. I really do like Arbuckle on RPOs. It's something that he's done all the way back to Georgia State. I thought he actually did that pretty well as an Argonaut in his first stint with Toronto. And so let's bring some of those back into play, where you have your veteran receivers, guys like DeVaris Daniels, who can run those glance routes out of the slot, and just one read. You're just watching that backer. If the backer comes in to try and stop Kadeem Carey, then you pull it and you throw it to DeVaris and get those easy yards. And if he doesn't, then let Carey run. So that's an area of the game that I think that you can go to. I think screens in that same way, if you've got that real balance and unpredictability in your offensive game plan, screens now become a weapon too, because you don't necessarily need to run them in obvious, 2nd and 15 situations where they're just not going to generate first down. So that's going to be my offensive game plan, is keep mixing it up, be unpredictable, get back to some of those things that your quarterbacks do well. And one last thing I'll say is, I do want to see Dukes continue to run the football. I think he's a weapon there. I want to see him actually pull on some of those, what look like reads. I want to see him pull the football and really get to the outside and challenge those corners too. JB, where are you going for the... Sorry, go on.
No, just to jump into your idea, I felt like the Argos left yards on the ground there against Hamilton. I would have run more. I think Hamilton was running some lighter boxes and were sort of feeding the run a little. I would have punished them a little more with the run instead of trying to essentially it's like, okay, if you want to do this, and we have 3 running backs, we're gonna come at you with more runs. We end up with 100 yards, but I would have run more. So I would do that if Winnipeg tries to pull that. I think I know they don't feel like they're built to run every down, but I would run more. I would definitely try and push that envelope a little if teams are going to try and shut Dukes down that way.
And what's your plan defensively for the Argonauts?
Yeah, I mean, Winnipeg's a weird team. They're like Toronto in the sense that they're 9th in points and 8th in touchdowns, but first in first downs gained, first in average yard per play. It's kind of reverse Saskatchewan. Like statistically, you look at this and they're 9th in passing touchdowns. so there's some statistics that they're just terrible at, but then they're third in rushing. They are a team that should be better than 2 wins. If you look at if you're second in first downs and first in average yard per play, that's not a 2-win team. So I am a little concerned about Winnipeg. Defensively, if Oliveira plays, I think it all starts with him. I think you absolutely have to shut him down. Much like Saskatchewan with Ouellette, we need McManus to get that same hate on for Oliveira, and you have to shut them down. When you look at Winnipeg, when Oliveira gets going and he's over 100 yards, they win. And when they lose, it's when he's only putting up 50 or 60 yards. And I think, what you want to get into causation? I'm going to call it causation. So I think you have to stop the run. You stop Oliveira, you stop that aspect of their game. You have to keep Collaros in the pocket and not allow him to get free yards and free first downs. But other than that, I'm not scared of their wide receiver core. So for me, it's a run heavy defense, and you can bring guys up. I mean, I'm not worried about the deep pass. I think as long as you keep him in the pocket, you don't let him roll out and find those deep scramble passes. That's what I'm looking to do, because that's what they want to do. They want to throw to Oliveira. They want to pass to Oliveira. They're similar in some ways to Toronto's offense, and I would look to try and stop the run, because you're not going to shake Collaros the way you might Dukes. But if we can jam up that run, I think they win.
My one thing this week is I want to see more than 12 yards per completion from Cameron Dukes. I think that stat on its own, he's averaging about 10.5 so far this season, 10.5 yards per completion. I think Dukes has shown himself to be an accurate quarterback. He can really find his spots. If he's pushing the ball downfield successfully, I think that's a win for the Toronto Argonauts. So if you can get to that number 12 for Dukes, to me, that would be the difference in the game. So that's going to be my one thing. What's your one thing for the Argos this week?
5 yards. So Winnipeg has less than 75 yards running. If that's the case, Toronto definitely wins.
So that's all running backs combined, less than 5 yards?
Yeah,
less than 75 yards? Yeah.
As a team, 75 yards. So no cheap Collaros first downs. And, if Oliveira doesn't play, that's huge. I think they'll get there. But if Oliveira's in, you have got to keep him under control.
My prediction this week, I think it's tight. I think it's a really tight game, and it is going to be a bar fight. Like Argos win 23-20 is where I'm putting this. What about you, JB?
I do feel Toronto can win this game. I think they should win this game. Even if Oliveira plays, he clearly is a little banged up. So is he going to be 100%? I don't think so. I like Toronto to win. I think if they can get another special teams touchdown, that's what pushes their offense into the high 20s, which I think they need. So I like Toronto 24-21.
And it is now time for the segment that you used to hate, but you haven't been hating as much lately, JB. This is Put Me Down for 20. Before we get into Put Me Down for 20, we got to warn you that you should not take anything we say in this segment very seriously. And unless you like losing your money, please only ever bet what you're happy to lose, the cost of entertainment, and know that we ourselves are not to be trusted in the least. So take anything we say with a grain of salt, please. That said, we are both in the black so far this season. I'm sitting after a win and a loss last week. I'm at 226 even from my original 200 Golden Fleeces, and you were at 213 after a really nice win. You had Devaris Daniel for an anytime touchdown at plus 190. So you're up to 213 Golden Fleeces. The Elks, once again, they'll let you down. So I'll be curious to see if you go back to your Elks this week after.
I think in fairness, Boris Beatty let me down more than the Elks as an organization.
That's fair. So I'm going to give you honors this week for your 20 Golden Fleeces. So what are you going to do with those hard-earned fleeces for your one Argos play and your one non-Argos play?
So for my non-Argos play, I have 10 Golden Fleeces down, and I booked this yesterday with Saskatchewan at plus 162 on the money line to win. Doesn't look like Fajardo. Well, Fajardo for sure is not going to play now. I think Saskatchewan is a very good team. Obviously, winning in Montreal is not easy, but I think Saskatchewan is going to start figuring out what it is they want to do, and I like Saskatchewan on the road.
And with your Argos bet?
And my Argos bet, you would think this would be easy. I'm going with two big plays, two plus plays. So that is either a 20-yard run or a 30-yard pass. Argos need to do it twice. I feel confident they're going to get one 20-yard run. I'm gonna need one big pass there, guys. But that is plus 100, and
Right.
that is for 10. So I like that. I mean, it's not a ton of juice, but I like it.
For me, I'm going to go for my non-Argos play. I've got Walter Fletcher under 50.5 yards rushing. Saskatchewan's run defense, like we got to take a pretty close look at that. The Argos have done better than anybody against the Riders' run defense. That is a very tough unit to run against. You have to think that this week, knowing that Fajardo's not going to play quarterback, they're really looking to stop the run and force Evans to beat you with his arm. And so to me, that means Walter Fletcher is in for a very long day. So under 50.5 rushing yards for Walter Fletcher. And then my Argos bet is really simple. Argos at minus 1.5 on the point spread, and that's at plus 100 at the moment. And so I like that. Argos to win by 2 or more is to me a nice play at plus 100. So those are my 2 bets and my 20 golden fleeces for this week. Let's get into our CFL picks, but not before recapping last week. It was a little bit of a slog for me. I think I was I 1-3 last week? I was 1-3 last week. Saskatchewan was the only game that I picked correctly, and you were 2-2 last week. And so my record is now 18-10. JB, you are 16-12. Going into this week. So
knocking on the door.
You are catching up slowly but surely. Maybe another flight of something in the water beer waiting for you in your future. Let's get into our week 8 picks. So Saskatchewan at Montreal. I'll go first here. I'm going to take Montreal in this game. I just think Montreal is not going to lose 2 in a row at home and coming off a bye week. And I know it's not Fajardo. I know the team looks very different without him. I just can't see them dropping 2 in a row at home with that bye and the staff and the team they've got around their backup quarterback. So for me, that's a Montreal win. Are you going to stick with your Saskatchewan Roughriders?
I'm going to. I think even I know off the bye at home, everything's pointing Montreal. But I think Saskatchewan is figuring some things out, and I had them as the number 1 team in the preseason. So I like Saskatchewan.
Calgary at Ottawa. I want nothing to do with this game. I have no idea how Ottawa keeps winning football games. I don't think the Red Blacks are a very good team, honestly. They've won the last 2 against the Elks, and that is maybe a bit misleading, but they have won the games they're supposed to win or have a chance to win. I know they got demolished by Montreal, and that's why I don't think they're a very good team. Like, they just got absolutely dismantled. And to me, that's more what the Red Blacks are as a team, and yet they seem to put it together. Calgary, I thought, played pretty good football last week. As long as Calgary doesn't shoot themselves in the foot, they should be able to win this game in my mind. So I've got the Stampeders. What about you?
Yeah, I cannot. After watching that Edmonton Calgary game or the Edmonton Ottawa game, I will not choose Ottawa. I mean, Calgary is a weird team, but I'm going to pick them to win in Ottawa, but I hate that game and would not put any real money on it.
Winnipeg at Toronto. Unlike you, I don't hedge, so I've got Toronto, obviously. What is your pick for Winnipeg, Toronto?
I mean, I know this narrative of hedging is how I'm catching up to you, but I think the reality is your false start was just that, false at the beginning. I'm going to go with Toronto here. I think Toronto wins this.
Hamilton at Edmonton. This is the second game I want nothing to do with. I don't like. How do you even pick this game? Hamilton at Edmonton. I believe Edmonton should win this game, but I am not going anywhere near the Elks until they start to win games. I've been burned by them too many times. I think I picked them for like 4 of their weeks so far, and obviously every one of them has been wrong. So I'm done. I'm done with you, Edmonton. I have no faith in Hamilton, but I have less faith in you. I'm going with the Tiger Cats to win this one.
Yeah, me too. Edmonton, I can't believe you made me watch you play that entire Ottawa game. And so for that alone, I will not be picking you against Hamilton.
Hopefully you get a chance to come and join me at Something in the Water Brewing this Saturday. We've got a lot of things coming up in the future as well. Some stuff that's going to be down here at Something in the Water. There's a lot going to be going on this Saturday too. And so make sure you're down here. I'll be down here at about 4:00. And we've got Something in the Water tickets to give away. If you have not yet done so, if you go to X's and Argos on social media and retweet our free ticket giveaway tweet, then you have a chance to win a pair of tickets to this coming game this Saturday at BMO Field against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. So that draw is going to be late tonight. Make sure you get a chance to go on social media, retweet that for your chance to win a pair of tickets to the Blue Bombers and Argos. That will just about do it for us on this pregame walkthrough edition of the X's and Argos podcast, live from Something in the Water Brewing. This is Ben Grant for JB saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go, Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe, foe.